What's up, everyone? Welcome to Communicating Through Conflict. Man, I'm so excited that you're here. Before we do anything else, if you could, in the comments, let me know, is this thing on? Can you hear me? So as you're doing that, if you could, drop your name into the comments. Where are you? Where are you tuning in from? And what do you do? I like to get a gauge of who's hanging out with me today. So if you could go into the comments, let me know you can hear me, drop your name, what you do, and where you're joining us from today. As some people are still joining in, if you could do that, that would be amazing. So welcome to Communicating Through Conflict. This is going to be an amazing hour. We're going to hang out. We're going to dig into some real issues. And there's a reason that you showed up today. Conflict is inevitable. It's a real thing. Whether we're talking about work, our conference table, our dinner table, or the holidays, conflict is right around the corner. And we all have tendencies and patterns and familiar repetition when it comes to conflict. And today is going to be all about digging into what patterns you see in your life personally and really getting after the reasons that you showed up here today. And so if we're not careful, conflict destroys organizations. It can wreck families. It can wreck teams. If we have healthy conflict, then every future interaction, every future conversation gets better and easier and easier. So the goal here is that we get deep, that we get psychological safety, that people around us feel heard, valued, and appreciated. And more importantly, that every conversation after this next one gets easier and easier and easier. So again, I'm excited that you're here, and I'm curious if you want to put into the chat why you showed up here today. What drove you to Communicating Through Conflict? Whether you got this from my email list or somebody invited you to this class or I invited you personally, why did you show up to Communicating Through Conflict? The odds are that there's something going on in your life right now. The odds are that there's either somebody at work or somebody at home or some relationship that feels harder than it should. That there's some area of your life that you're like, man, if I could just get this area of my life to be better, if I could get this relationship to be easier, if I could get these projects to go smoother, if I could stop arguing, having conflict, or simply withdrawing from the conversation altogether, life would be better. Life would be easier. And if you want to put into the comments, protect the dignity and privacy of the person that you're talking about. But if you want to put into the comments why you showed up today, I would love to read that. Why did you show up today? What conflict are you trying to resolve? My purpose and the reason we're doing this webinar is that we want to smash patterns of negative conflict. We don't want to eliminate conflict altogether, but we want to smash negative patterns. Maybe it's Bob at the office, and every time you submit an idea or anytime that you speak, Bob counters you with questions that feel critical. And it makes you withdraw and not want to share your ideas, and Bob ends up dominating the meeting, so his ideas get taken over yours. Maybe it's at home. You go home and you love your family and you sit at the dinner table and everything seems to be going well until that no-go zone gets brought up, until somebody says something, makes an offhand joke, or something is said that causes conflict and silence at the dinner table. And dinner is over and people go their separate ways and the rest of the evening is ruined because we didn't know how to navigate that conflict. And it seems to get harder and harder year after year. All of these are negative patterns. It's not that we want to avoid conflict, but we want the conflict to be constructive, and we want each conflict to make the next one easier. And so today we're going to go over 3 problems, 3 patterns, 3 things that tend to happen over and over and over again, that if we can learn to navigate them, if we can learn to understand them, then we can change the outcome. We can change the result or change ultimately our reality. And at the end of this, when we get to the very end of today's webinar, I'm not trying to sell you anything today, so don't worry. There's no like credit card or anything coming at the end, no upsell, so you can relax. But when I get to the end, I am going to have 5 tips for you. So as we go through each of these problems, you're going to start to identify your patterns. I'm going to have 5 tips that will apply directly to you. 5 tips to help you stop your next conflict right in its tracks. So if this sounds good so far, into the comments, drop a oh yeah. I love the oh yeah, like the Kool-Aid man, like oh yeah. And so we'll get used to using oh yeahs and booms. I'm a big fan of the booms in the comments as well. So if this makes sense to you, if you're excited, if you think that you came to the right workshop, then drop into the comments. Give me an oh yeah down below. So oh yeah, here we go. Now before we get started, I'm going to introduce myself very briefly. So my name is Mark. This is my family: Justice, Kyrie, Kenzie, Kaylee, and Angela. My wife and I have been married for 21 years, and I'm a 21-year Air Force veteran. So I retired from the United States Air Force back in 2019. My life in a nutshell started out pretty rough. I went to almost a dozen schools from kindergarten through high school. I got involved with drug culture and crime culture at a very young age. I had no prospects, nothing really going for me, and I joined the military right out of high school. I went into the military and continued a lot of the destructive patterns that I had been building on my whole life. And in my first year in the Air Force, I just started getting in trouble like you wouldn't believe, just getting all kinds of administrative action, letters of counseling and reprimand and admonishment. And at about a year and a half into the military, I actually found myself handcuffed in the back of a police car. And I was on this knife's edge. I got arrested. I was on base, and I was on this knife's edge where the Air Force was either going to send me home or they were going to let me stay in. And believe it or not, even with all the trouble that I had been in, the Air Force let me re-enlist. And so I re-enlisted, and I got married within a year and a half or so of that. I found my faith, and I got issued a brand new supervisor. And that new supervisor was a staff sergeant at the time, Staff Sergeant Kevin Chronister, who would later retire as Chief Chronister. But he really flipped my life upside down in a way that no one had ever done before. And so almost immediately, my behavior and my actions in my life started to change. And from that moment on, I really never got in trouble again. And I started my career in all of the trouble and all of the conflict that you don't want your young people to go through. And I ended my career as a leadership school commandant. And so I was teaching. I started out in trouble, and then I ended my career teaching and certifying future leaders. So these people would come to my schoolhouse, and I would give them their certification that told the Air Force that, yes, these folks are ready to go out and lead soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, which was really cool. And my family and I got hit by a train when we were in Amsterdam, which led to this crazy chain of events where I ended up retiring, and I became a partner in a company called Giant, where many of the tools that we'll talk about today come from. And I've worked with military leadership all over the world. I spent a year doing the Congressional Leadership Series, and I'm the author of the book, The Leader's Garden, How to Grow Healthy, High-Performing People. So you can get my book. It's on Amazon, wherever books are sold. But The Leader's Garden, How to Grow Healthy, High-Performing People. This is my mission in life. My mission in life is to do professional development that matters, to help you move metrics at work, to improve your key performance indicators, and to make your families healthier. It's one set of tools: self, family, team, organization, and community. One set of tools that applies equally well to your teenager, your spouse, and your subordinates. And so that's me. That's who I am. I wake up every day passionate about you and excited to hang out with you, even if it is only through the comments section. So super stoked to be here with you today. And I only want transformation in your life. And for this, the big idea in this workshop is that we want a world of healthy, productive conflict. We want to wrestle through tough issues. We want to talk about hard things, but we don't want to dread future conversations. So it's not that we want to have conflict that makes us withdraw and not like one another or damages our relationships, but we want conflict that builds us up, that helps us refine the rough edges. Stones get put into rock tumblers and gems come out. And that process isn't always fun. It isn't always easy. But what it produces is gold. It produces things of real value. That's what conflict is designed to do. It's designed to produce outcomes of real value, superior value to what we could do on our own. If we all agree, if we all think the same way, then at least one of us is unnecessary. And so we want to learn to become a rock tumbler of ideas. I want each of you to create an environment, whether it's at home, at work, at the conference table, or dinner table, an environment where we're comfortable tumbling rocks around without hurt feelings, without negative emotion, in a way that all we care about collectively is producing things of real value. And so as we go in, as I talked about, we're going to focus on your tendencies and on the patterns in your life, focusing on 3 common problems that I see in conflict. And the tool that we're going to use is called Know Yourself to Lead Yourself. And we'll put everything through this lens. And the idea here in Know Yourself to Lead Yourself is that each of you exists in a reality. And your reality, some of it's good, some of it's bad. There's a reason you showed up here today. Like there's a reason that you're in this webinar and not doing something else, right? There are things in your life that you'd like to get better at or things that you would like to change. There are things in your life you would die to defend, right? Things that are non-negotiables for you. For me, Justice, Kyrie, Kenzie, Kaylee, my family, my wife, these are things that I would die to defend. But if God came down and said, Mark, you've earned a wish, what do you want? There are things about my life I would change like overnight if I could. But the fact of the matter is that where I am, where I live, the spouse that I married, the children I have, this reality is simply the consequence of my actions, right? Our reality is the consequence of the sum of our actions. We did a bunch of stuff. That stuff had consequences, good and bad. That shaped our present reality. And if I could look at your actions over any period of time, if I could see your morning routine, if I could see your conversations, your text messages, your emails, your conversations with your spouse and your children, what I would find is that your actions actually play out in very consistent patterns of behavior. That most of what we do is actually pattern-based, things that are repeated over time, over and over again. And that our patterns are often based on hardwired tendencies, things about us that don't tend to change over time. And so the biggest thing that we can do to further our professional and personal development is learn to understand our tendencies so that we can shape and change our patterns. And these patterns are where good leadership goes to great leadership, good friendship goes to great friendship, good marriages go to great marriages. But we have to get past our actions and get one step further into patterns. If you look at my reality, I ended my career as a leadership school commandant, 12 Outstanding Airmen of the Year on my team, Air Force Professional Development Team of the Year. I spent a year teaching Congress how to lead, like all of these things that I was able to do. That was my reality when I left the Air Force. But the start of my reality was that I was handcuffed in the back of a police car and getting into all kinds of trouble. My tendencies never changed. I have a tendency to think I'm smarter than you, that the rules don't apply to me, and that I can talk or think my way out of any situation. All things untrue. When I was younger, those tendencies played out in patterns that caused me to get in trouble. But towards the end of my career and where I am now, those patterns or those tendencies play out in patterns that help me to innovate, to push the envelope and not take no for an answer, to do things that others might not think of. And so the patterns is what we have the ability to change. How we feel inside our tendencies, that's going to remain consistent, very likely for the course of our life. And so we're going to explore 3 different problems, 3 different patterns that will hopefully shed light on your tendencies so that we can shape some aspect of your reality. And if you're excited by this idea, and here's what I'm really getting after, tonight, when you sit down at dinner with your family, tomorrow, when you sit at your conference table, when you lead your people, I want something to change. Something should be different this evening. Something should be different tomorrow. And if that excites you, because it excites me, every time I go through this class, something changes in my life. Every single time that I teach this class, something changes in my life. And if that excites you, then oh yeah, me in the comments, you know what to do. Oh yeah, like the Kool-Aid man, the more O's, the more yeah, the more you stretch it out, that's where you get the bonus points. And so, oh yeah, write in the comments if that excites you. I'm super stoked. Ready to get into problem number 1. What is the first pattern that we see? And as we look at tendencies and patterns, it's not only mine that matter. If I think about me and my spouse, me and my son, me and my teammates, they have patterns. I have patterns. And the challenge is that I'm working on mine, they're working on theirs. They get mashed together. And so it isn't enough for me to simply chase after personal development. I need to chase after others' awareness as well, not just self-awareness. I need to know others to lead others, know myself to lead myself. All right, here we go. I'm excited. Let's jump in to problem number 1. Now, problem number 1 is it's not an issue of emotion. All right, let's jump in to pattern number 1. Here we go. Pattern number 1 is you're too emotional or you don't care. Now stop me if you've heard this one. The first one is this: you're in a conversation with someone, you're having a heated discussion, conflict is on the horizon, or maybe you're knee deep into it, and one person in the conversation says, hey, you're overreacting. You're being too emotional right now. You're too invested in this. Why are you so worked up? If you've ever heard those words, type "oh yeah" in the comments. Or if you've ever said those words, you don't have to be enthusiastic about it. You could just put in the comments that, me. You can drop a me in there, but you're too emotional. This is something that I say. It's something that I've said more times than I would like to admit. You're too emotional. One person is participating in the conversation, trying to have a logical, thought out conversation, get to the truth, get to the facts. And the other person is getting worked up, getting emotional, and doesn't seem to be responding to logic. And rather than pursuing the course of action that will lead to resolution, we say things and we attack the person. You're too emotional, you're too invested, you're overreacting. Now, there's a flip side to that coin, because in all of these, it's almost like we're looking at a coin. We're on one side or we're on the other. If this coin had two faces and they were different, one would be yours, one would be the person that you're having conflict with. And so that's one side of the coin. But if we flip that coin over, it's you don't care. So now we're looking from the perspective of the person who's having an emotional reaction to the conversation. And the other person is cold and they're logical and they're not getting heated, where sometimes it feels almost like the person just wants you to get heated. They're not getting heated. They're sticking to the facts. And the person just can start to think, well, you don't care as much as I do. You just don't care enough. And so if that's ever happened to you, people feel like you don't care. And it isn't that you don't care. You're just trying to be logical. Oh yeah, me in the comments. You know what to do now. Whoever looks at this chat later, it's going to be full of Kool-Aid mans, right? Oh yeah. All right. So you're too emotional. That's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that you don't care. So this is the first pattern. We get locked into this emotion versus logic conflict. And this can't be resolved by simply talking it through. We've got to truly understand what's happening. And so what is happening? Here's the problem. We're acting as if this is an emotion issue. It's not an issue of emotion. I often say, and I have a webinar titled, "It's not a care problem." This is not a care problem. It's not that you care too much and I care too little. I care too much, you care too little. It's not about emotion or lack of emotion. But the fact is that each one of us is operating from a different default perspective. And it's based on these two words, empathy and problem solving. And I know problem solving is not one word, but you'll just have to bear with me for a second. Empathy and problem solving. We know what these two words mean, but let's get on the same page really quick. Empathy are all of the things that are emotion-based, the things that are geared towards helping the person on the other side of us feel better. Somebody falls, they trip, they skin their knee. Oh, are you okay? Let me hug you. Oh my gosh, let me get you a popsicle, a lollipop. Let's get a Band-Aid. I'll kiss your boo-boo. Empathy. Problem solving are all of those things that are designed to help the person with the issue that they're experiencing. Oh my gosh, you fell? Let me get the Neosporin. Let me get a Band-Aid. Or in the extremes, why are you running in the house? You know you're not supposed to be doing that. Empathy and problem solving. When your child is running through the hallway and they trip and they fall and they smack their head, wow, I hit myself pretty hard there. People with empathy are the ones who are like, oh my gosh, are you okay? People that are problem solvers more naturally are going to be like, why are you running? People that have empathy as their default voice. Now, keep in mind, we do both of these. It's just one is more energizing, one is more draining. One is our default internal voice. People that have empathy first, when somebody comes in your office and they're crying and they're upset, people that have empathy as their default voice, their natural reaction is, how do I help this person feel better? Are you okay? Problem solvers are like, what's wrong? How do I help you with your problem? Empathy versus problem solving. And as I'm describing these, if you know which one of these is more energizing to you than the other, put it into the chat. Empathy or problem solving. Which one of these is more energizing? Which one of these is more draining? Which is your default internal voice? Now, people with empathy as their default voice, if you're trying to navigate this a little bit, people with empathy tend to follow their heart. If it feels right, it probably is right. Their moral compass governs their decision-making process. Problem solvers follow logic, right? So you're following your heart, I'm following logic. That's difficult for us to reconcile. Is it morally or technically correct? Ideally, it would be both, but we're having this argument. And it's one of the bigger problems we have in American politics. Is it morally correct or technically correct? Is it the outcome that matters or the intent that matters? People with empathy tend to feel warm and compassionate, especially to people they feel responsible for. Where problem solvers tend to focus on the truth, regardless of if that's cold or compassionate or dispassionate. People with empathy tend to avoid conflict, and this seeps into areas like holding people accountable or giving clear expectations. Where problem solvers don't tend to avoid conflict, they're typically quick to find inconsistencies. People that have empathy as their default voice, they are naturally peacekeepers, where problem solvers will be curious to get to the root of the issue, regardless of how it makes you feel. When it comes to decision making, people with empathy as their default voice, they seek consensus, where problem solvers are seeking right and wrong. And people that have empathy as their default voice are focused on the relationship and what happens after the conflict. Problem solvers, they tend to avoid small talk and just want to get to the issue. And so you can see here that when it comes to conflict, we're operating on two different operating instructions, two different technical orders, two sets of code. And what we can't do and shouldn't do is ascribe motive or moral shortcoming to the person on the other side. If I'm a problem solver, I can't look at someone with a default voice of empathy and not meet their needs and then blame them that they're too emotional. If I'm talking to my wife and she has concerns about the children, I can't simply tell her that the kids can just tough it out. They'll be all right. That's not going to work. We have to talk through how we're meeting the needs, meeting her leadership needs and the needs of the people that we lead. And the opposite is also true. So what I want you to do right now is, first and foremost, I want you to put in the chat, if you haven't done this already, which of these is your default? Is it empathy? Is it problem solving? Which of these do you find comes more naturally to you? Empathy or problem solving? And if you have time, if you've got fast fingers, you can even share a story. We would love to read your stories, and I won't be able to read all of them during this, but I'll definitely go back and read them after it's over. But which is more energizing to you? Which is your default? I've already alluded to it. You've already heard it, but for me, I'm a problem solver. Empathy is not something that comes easy to me. I want to help you. I want to solve your problems because I care, but it can often come across as cold. In fact, when my children were little, they would get hurt and I'd be like, do you need to go to the doctor? And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, then you're fine. And it's like, wow, that was like stone cold problem solver, right? Do you need anything? No. All right, let's get back to the game. And I've learned over the years, if you see the way I interact with my younger children, like it couldn't be more different than the way I interacted with my older. I learned over time through the mentorship of great people, primarily my wife, who helped me to get better over time. But for me, it's definitely problem solving for sure. But as we look at empathy, as we look at problem solving, it's important that we understand that patterns in our personality in this area, they steer conflict into familiar patterns. My wife is primarily empathy. I'm primarily problem solving. And so many of the things that you might predict that would cause, it does cause. And so the biggest journey in my life has been learning to navigate someone who's very much not like me. And that's the gift of having a spouse that's not like you. It accelerates your development. But patterns in our personality steer conflict into familiar patterns and outcomes. All right, excellent. So we're looking at our reality, and now you're starting to see things. If you're starting to see something like, wow, this puts some perspective to what I've been experiencing with my spouse, my children, my boss, my subordinate, you know what's coming. Oh yeah, in the comments. Give me the Kool-Aid man down below in the comments. If you're starting to see something in your reality, you're like, wow, I'm starting to see this pattern and why this is playing out the way that it's playing out. It's not that my husband or my wife doesn't care. It's that they're a problem solver. It's not that my spouse is too emotional. It's that empathy is their default voice, their default decision-making lens. If that's the case, throw it into the comments that, yeah, I'm seeing something. And if you want to be specific, bring it. And it's time for us to talk about the second pattern that we see. Pattern number 2, this won't work. You don't get it, right? Have you ever experienced, like, you have someone on your team and it seems like they're out there. They're Willy Wonka, right? They're fantastical ideas, big dreams. No matter what we're working on right now, they always seem to have something new, something different. We can't get this locked in because they're already thinking about the next thing, the next biggest thing that they want to accomplish. Or they come out and say, here's what we should do. And you're like, but there's no way we could pay for that. There's no way we have manning for that. We'd have to do 50 other things or work twice as many hours to pull this off. This isn't going to work. Or do you ever feel like you're sitting at a table and you're giving your idea and people are just asking you question after question. Well, how do we pay for this? How do we do this? How do we do that? And you're like, you don't understand. We'll figure those things out. You don't get it. This is cool. This is exciting. This vision is right. It's compelling. This is the future. If we don't do this, we're going to fail later. There's two sides, the this won't work camp and the you don't get it camp. The we need to understand the details camp and we're excited by the vision camp. There's two different patterns. We get locked into this internal struggle where someone on the team, someone in the family is always trying to drag us back to reality. And someone on the team, someone on the family is always trying to drive us into new, exciting visions of the future. So what's happening in this situation? First of all, if you've ever experienced either of those from either perspective, either you are the stick in the mud or you're the dreamer. Oh yeah, me in the comments, you know what to do. right? And I'm going to have to come up with something else if the chat's too full of oh yeahs at this point. But let me know in the comments. Yes, this is familiar to me. I've seen this before. So what's happening in this situation? It's really easy to see. We're not worried about the same thing. That's it, right? We're focusing on different things. One camp is focusing on the here and now. One camp is focusing on the future. And so to put words to this, we use the words present and future orientation. People with the present orientation are very focused on the here, the now, and the how, right? Okay, there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Let's go get it. Okay, hold on one second. There's a jungle. How are we getting through the jungle? Oh, we'll figure it out. No. Like, what do we need to pack? How long are we going to be gone? How many supplies do we need? I don't know. Are there any jaguars, dangerous snakes, mosquitoes? Do we have a plan for any of that stuff? That's the present-oriented voices, right? The here, the now, the detail. The future-oriented voices are the ones that are more concerned with the compelling vision of the future. You don't understand. There's gold there. We got to go get it. And future-oriented voices are often excited by things like being the first, being the biggest, being the best. Where present-oriented voices are often excited by systems that are repeatable, systems that are efficient, systems that are reproducible. And so as we look at present and future, if you already know which one you are, throw it into the comments. I think I might be present. I think I might be future. But here's some ideas. Present-oriented voices are often focused on facts. They want to know the detail. What is the truth? Future-oriented voices are often focused on vision. It's not that they're not focused on the facts, but the details are not nearly as important. Present-oriented voices are often more down to earth, practical, where our future-oriented voices are often focused on the future rather than the now, and they often are very imaginative, outside-the-box thinkers. What if we did this? How cool would it be if? Our present voices are focused on the present and the past, and our future voices are more conceptual, abstract thinkers. What if we did this? Let's play with this idea where the present voices want to focus on the details. Okay, well, what's the plan? What's the checklist? What's the first step? This causes our present voices to take things very literally, where our future-oriented voices can be focused more on the meaning. This is what you said. Yeah, but this is what I meant. Yeah, but you said this. Yeah, but I meant that. Let's just not focus on what I said. Let's focus on my intent. And that can cause conflict because now we have to dig into what was said, what was meant, why we said what we said, why we did, and that can be a real challenge. And so these two voices, much like empathy and problem solving, they get locked into patterns of negative conflict. Present voices tend to ask lots of questions. Future voices want to get the idea out and move on and start making progress. Future-oriented voices are excited by progress. Present-oriented voices are excited by systems, by taking care of the organization and the people in it. And so here's what I want you to do. Are you default present? Are you default future? And I want you to share a story if you have some time to do that. So are you default present or default future? Are you the kind of person who focuses on the big picture or focuses on the small details? Are you the type of person who thinks outside the box? Are you the type of person who problem solves inside the box, present or future? And so the idea, the big idea, let me go back half a step while you share yours, but I'm future oriented. I'm so future oriented that when problems come up, I never talk about how we're going to fix them today. I always talk about, well, here's the system we're going to use someday to make this problem better. And that causes a lot of frustration for people around me. Just yesterday, we had a team meeting and it caused a little bit of conflict because I was talking about, okay, well, in the future, I'll make a spreadsheet and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But what are we going to do about this now? What are we going to do about this today? And it's like, oh, yeah, we still got to focus on that. We got to focus on today rather than tomorrow all the time. And so for me, anytime there's a problem, I just want to move on. There's no need to talk about the problem or why the problem exists. Let's just talk about how we change the problem in the future. And so it causes a lot of trouble for people around me. All right, so present and future, we've talked so far about empathy, problem solving, present and future, but this is the big idea, right? Patterns in our personality, empathy, problem solving, inner dynamics, present and future, this steers conflict into familiar patterns and outcomes. You're getting locked in conflict over these ideas over and over and over again. And we think that it's because they're a jerk, we just don't get along with them, whatever it is. But the reality is that it's actually a tangible, definable issue that can be resolved and worked through if we just understand each other. If I can understand where you're coming from, I can meet your needs. If I understand that I'm a future voice and you're a present voice, then I can start to craft my presentation so that I hit those areas that you need to know so that you're more excited. I build more influence with you over time. And the same thing is true with empathy and problem solving. If I know that you're empathy foundationally and that I'm problem solving foundationally, then when we talk, I can start with, is this the right thing to do morally? How are we taking care of our people, our children through this process? And once I hit those things, I know you'll feel free and liberated to move forward. I can change small things that have huge results in my reality. Just by starting, let's say with my spouse, just by starting with, okay, how are we taking care of the children during this vacation? Hey, I'm going to take Justice or Kyrie with me on this road trip. How am I going to take care of them on the airplane? How am I going to take care of them when we get there? How am I going to make sure that they feel cared for and I don't leave them alone while I'm doing my business stuff? And once my wife has those things taken down, then I can talk about all the other cool stuff that we're going to do. But as long as I don't meet those needs, then there's going to be conflict under the surface. But all of that is inside my control. All of it. I have this ability to change my pattern if I'm intentional. And it takes more time, and it's always easier not to. But if we continue with our current patterns, our reality will stay as is at best or continue to decay at worst. I have to meet people where they are because I'm the one thing I can control. I can take steps towards you. I can't demand that you take steps towards me. If you're with me, oh yeah, Kool-Aid Man, write in the comments. If you're with me, throw it in below. And some of you might have noticed I totally turned on my awesome Air Force candle in the background. For some reason, it wasn't on. So I can't start this over, unfortunately, and have my cool candle on. But there it is. So if you've got a cool thing in your office that you love, type it in the comments. What's your thing? I can't see you. You can see me. So what's that cool thing in your office that makes you feel awesome? When I look at myself in my webinar screen, I love that I have my Air Force candle there. So, all right, moving on. So problem or pattern, should I say, number 3, stop trying to solve me. Why are you complaining? So the stop trying to solve me part is, stop me if you've heard this one. You're in a conversation with someone, they're upset, and you start to help them brainstorm, right? Like, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And they say the most baffling words back to you. They look you in the eye, and with all the conviction of someone who believes what they're saying, they say, stop trying to solve me. I just want you to listen. And you think to yourself in your head, or if you're really bad like me, you say them out loud, and it's like, I'm not trying to solve you. I am listening. I'm trying to help you. How could I possibly respond with the advice I've given you if I wasn't listening? Right? I can't give you advice without listening. Of course I'm listening. Right? Stop trying to solve me. This happens a lot, especially in marriages. Although it's not exclusive territory. Stop trying to solve me. Or maybe the opposite is true. Why are you complaining? Here you are, you're talking about something, and it's maybe the 3rd or 4th time you brought it up, and the person on the other side of you has given you advice, and they finally have had enough, and they say, why do you keep complaining about this if you're not going to do anything about it? And we find ourselves locked with hurt feelings and damaged relationships and emotion that bubbles up to the surface because the person on the other side of us doesn't seem to understand us. We can't often understand why someone would come to us complaining about something if they don't want help. Or we don't often understand why we can't just share how we feel without the person on the other side of us turning it into, a therapy session. If this makes sense to you, if you've experienced this before, oh yeah, in the comments. You probably never typed oh yeah so much in your life, but oh yeah me, right in the comments. So stop trying to solve me. Why are you complaining? So what's actually happening here? Very common problem. Well, we're not speaking the same language. This is the idea. If you look on the screen, we've got like alu, hi, hello, hola, all these words up on the screen. And it makes sense to us when we say like, I'm speaking Spanish, you're speaking English, I'm speaking Russian, you're speaking Arabic, French, whatever. It makes sense to us. But often we think that we understand people. But really what we're doing is we're speaking our language to them. I want to give you advice because if I bring you a problem, that's what I want you to do. You want to listen to me and tell me how hard it is because that's what you want me to do. And we often don't understand the needs of the person on the other side of us. And so we have a tool, and it's called the communication code. And the communication code looks just like this. Well, because it is. And the communication code says that there are 5 different languages, primarily, that we're transmitting and receiving in when we're in conversation, especially in conflict. And those languages are critique, collaborate, clarify, care, and celebrate. And I'm going to give you an example. My son is writing a book, and he at times could, if he wanted to, give me a chapter of his book. And I'm going to work through each of these languages. So my son could give me a copy of his book, and he could say, critique this, critique my work, right? I want you to ask tough questions. Tell me why it doesn't work. Mark it up. Put red ink all over it. Critique. Collaborate is, hey, here's the first chapter of my book. Help me brainstorm. I'm having some difficulty with this area. Work with me. Shape this with me. Let's build this together. Help me get the best version of this book. Clarification. Hey, I'm trying to say this. Can you read this and let me know if it makes sense? Did I hit the mark, right? Clarify for me. Care. Here's the first chapter on book. It was so hard. I can't believe I actually did it. Can you care? Can you tell me that it was hard? Can you validate my experience and my humanity? And then celebrate. I'm so excited that I finished the first chapter of my book. Let's have some root beer floats. Let's go to Starbucks. Let's make an event out of this moment because it was really hard for me. Critique, collaborate, clarification, care, and celebrate. Now I want to put some context to our earlier problem. Stop trying to solve me. Why are you complaining? Let's pretend that we're talking about my spouse and my spouse comes and my spouse doesn't work, but let's pretend that she does. And she goes to work and she has problems with Bob at the office, right? She goes into meetings. Bob talks over her. He cuts her off. He criticizes her. She can never get a word in. And she comes home and she's like, Bob did it again today at work. And she's saying, care, 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 right? That's flashing on the screen, but I don't see it, right? She's like, it's hard. Hug me, sit with me, have a glass of wine or tea with me, and just be there for me right now because it was a hard day. Care, right? But I don't see it. So what do? I collaborate. And I say, oh man, he did it again. That jerk. Did you do the thing? I told you last time, when he says this, you're going to say that. Did you say that? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, why? You said you were going to do that next time. She's like, you don't understand. You weren't there. Now she's frustrated. I'm frustrated. I'm trying to help her. But what she hears is you're trying to solve me. I'm collaborating. She wants care. Right? So a better solution would be, it was so hard. It's like, oh, do you want help? Do you want to talk about the problem, or do you just want to just sit and just vent? I just want to vent. Okay, let's do that. Uh-huh. Oh yeah, that sounds hard. Yeah, Bob's mean. Yeah, Bob's a jerk, right? Like Bob doesn't know how good he has it with you. He sure is good. Well, you should quit. Bob will really miss you, if you quit. I can care because I know that's what she needs. But we don't Jedi mind trick. I can ask her, right? Critique, collaborate, clarify, care, and celebrate. My languages are criticism and collaborate. You bring me an idea, I'm going to tell you how your idea is not good enough. Whether that's what you wanted or not, and if you can relate to that, type a me too in the comments, right? Like that's what I do. I want to critique. I want to collaborate. People around me often want me to care or celebrate with them. And so I've learned over the years of like with my son's book, I didn't put myself in a position. I don't want to be the person to critique it ever. I only want to care and celebrate, right? I want him to feel that I'm his biggest cheerleader. So he has an editor, he has a proofreader, but it's not me, right? Because I don't want to be that person at this stage of his journey. So the idea with each of these is that we need to get proficient in them. There are some that we're good at, some that we're bad at. We need to get proficient at them. But more than that, we need to establish common language in our relationships, our family, our marriages, with our children, our subordinates, our teammates, our bosses, our organizations, so that we're in the right language at the right time and that we understand. We can look at Bob and Bob's like, I got questions. You can say, look, Bob, I know that you got questions. We're not at that stage yet. I don't have details yet. So I just want to celebrate that this idea seems like it might be fruitful. And we're going to have another meeting. We're going to have a deep dive into this. But for now, let's just ask some clarifying questions maybe about the idea, but no criticism just yet. Okay, I could do that. I change my hat and switch hats. We got to get proficient. But here's what I want to know from you right now. Which of these comes most naturally and least naturally to you? Critique, collaboration, clarification, care, celebration. And if you've got time, jam out a little story. But if this puts perspective to something in your life, I want to know. I want to know that it's having an impact. But what code comes most and least naturally to you? Which is it? Critique, collaboration, clarification, care, or celebration? For me, it's critique and collaboration. And I mentioned that already. Critique and collaboration. These are the big ones for me. And that gets me into a lot of trouble for sure. And so thinking about, now we've talked about 3 different things: empathy, problem solving, future, present, and now the communication code. And as we think about these 3 things, understand that patterns in our personality, right? Empathy, problem solving, inner dynamics, future, present, and our default communication code steers conflict into familiar patterns and outcomes, meaning our reality is being shaped by these patterns. If I'm a problem solver, there are things in my reality that have been shaped by that. If my communication is critique, there are patterns that have shaped my reality. If I'm a future-oriented voice, there are patterns that have shaped my reality. And if anything in today's workshop so far has illuminated something in your reality, you're like, oh my gosh, this puts perspective to something, type it in the comments. I see this. I noticed that. I didn't realize this. What is it? Throw it into the comments. Get it going. I want to see, I want to hear, but it also gives other people permission to share and be transparent. There's one thing to think it, another thing to type it. It becomes more real when we write it. Problem identified is a problem half solved. If you're willing to confront it, if you're willing to face it, then you have it in you to change it. But if it stays here, if it doesn't come out, the odds you're going to do something about it diminish every day. So type it. What is it that you see about yourself? Empathy, problem solving, future, present, communication code. What do you see? Is it critique, collaborate, clarify, care, celebrate? What do you see? What in your reality needs to change? And so we're almost done. I'm getting close to wrapping this up, but what I want to do is I have 5 solid tips to change your game. So no matter what it is that you said in the comments, hey, I'm future, I'm present, I'm past, I'm past, that's not even one. I don't know what I'm doing. Future, present, empathy, problem solving, communication code. I've got 5 tips to change your game. 5 tips to help you improve. That's what I'm going to end with. So give me just a second. But first, I want to ask you a question. And the question is, what if? What if you had a common language in your family? What if everyone in your family spoke empathy, problem solving, future, present, communication code? What if everyone at your conference table, everyone in your organization spoke empathy, problem solving, care, communication code, future, present? We understood one another. And more importantly, not only do we speak it, but we know what everyone around the table is. Hey, I know Bob is problem solving. I know Jill is empathy. I know Mike is empathy. What would that look like in your organization? Type it into the chat. What problem do you think that would solve? Would there be no more frustrations when people are emotional? Hey, Mike, I hear you, man. That's a real legitimate concern. I'd like to explore that. I want to make sure that we solve that problem. Can you be in charge of that? Can you brainstorm some ideas? I understand this is a real concern for you. Can you brainstorm some ideas and get back to us? Hey, can you sit down with Jim and sort that out? There's no more, hey, you're being too emotional. Hey, you're overreacting. Hey, those problems dissipate in the wind. What would it feel like if that happened? Is that a problem that you're dealing with on your team? Chat right below. What would it feel like if we stopped feeling like people don't care about our feelings? Well, Bob, I can't stand Bob, right? Like Bob doesn't care about any of our feelings. He's stone cold and he just slams every idea. What if we stop feeling like Bob doesn't care and we start putting Bob's criticism, his critique to work in the right place at the right time? What would that feel like? What would it feel like if there were no more frustrations over difficult questions, no more micromanagement? What would that feel like? What would that do on your team? I can tell you what it would do. We measure team performance in 5 different areas: communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity. And we have an assessment we use called Invincible Teams. We're in 127 different countries. We're the leadership language of Google. It's really cool. Our goal is always to improve team performance in a measurable way. Right? So it's professional development. We don't do it in order to feel good and understand each other, although that's awesome. We do it to move the needle on the numbers that matter. And the system that we use is actually called 5 Voices. 5 Voices is the common language that you need on your team. 5 Voices is the common language that we use to help people understand these complex or relatively complex concepts, to simplify them. And in 5 Voices, we break people down into nurturer, creative, guardian, connector, pioneer. Nurturers are the champions of people, relational harmony, and values. Creatives, future ideas, innovation, organizational integrity. Guardians, due diligence, resources, efficient systems and processes. Connectors, people, collaboration, effective communication, relational networks. Pioneers, strategic vision, results focused, and problem solving. And each of these voices, I'm not going to get deep into them right now, but each of these voices has their own source code. And we break them down in 5 different workshops. Workshop number 1 is Discover Your Leadership Voice. What are these voices? Workshop number 2 is The Power of Your Voice. What do they bring at their best? What do they bring at their worst? How do they impact the world in a positive and a negative way? Next, The Art of Collaboration. How do we work together? Empathy, problem solving, future, present, all of these words that we're doing. How do these voices actually work together? How do we bring the best out of each other? Optimizing team performance is how do we lead people that aren't like us? How do we do communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity in a way that uptrends the performance of our team so that we're doing better and better over time? We have less turnover, higher efficiency, more capacity to take on new and grow and conquer the universe. And last is team kryptonite, right? All of these things sound great. There are things that are standing in your way. There's a reason why your team isn't already functioning at the highest level. And that's what team kryptonite is. And so what I want for you at a minimum is for your team, for you, for your family to go through all 5 of these workshops, transforming team communication. And one of the things that it reveals is the source code for each voice. And so each voice has a weapon system and superpowers and triggers and liberation statements, ways that they want to be led. But what that source code reveals to us is actually really neat, because it shows us that all nurturers have empathy as their foundational voice, as their default language. So now I know that all of the nurturers on my team, they have a certain skill set in common. They have certain tendencies in common, leadership needs in common, ideas, thoughts, patterns in common. So not only do I know how to better utilize them, I know how to meet their needs before they express them. And so my frustration level drops because I can plan and I can sort that out before I speak to them. All nurturers are present-oriented voices. And so I understand they're inside-the-box thinkers. They have concerns about today. Before they can think about tomorrow, they have to understand that today is taken care of. Present-oriented voices. And we know that nurturers tend to gravitate towards care and celebration. And so if I know that one thing about someone, that they're a nurturer, I start to understand all kinds of things that are happening underneath the surface. And since there's only 5 voices, it's easy to memorize. It's sticky and it goes viral. Once it gets into the ecosystem, everyone starts speaking it. And so my goal for you is that we get your team through all 5 of these workshops. That's a starting point. And that we scale it across your organization so that we have a common language. We can pursue psychological safety, that everyone feels heard, valued, and appreciated. But most importantly, communication, relationships, alignment, execution, and capacity start to improve in a way that you can measure. 90 days from now, your key metrics should be higher performing teams, healthier people than you have today. That's the promise. And so what we have to do is we've got to figure out which path you're going to take to get there. Let's assume that you're not in the path of, I don't want to do anything. Let's assume that you're in the path of either you want to pick up the torch and help teach and spread this message far and wide, or that you want to implement this on your team. Both results are the same. So if you're someone who's interested, man, what you're doing and what you're speaking, it speaks to me. I want to learn this so that I can teach it, I can implement it, I can become a consultant. Or if you're inside of the military, you can bring this to your base. And you can actually use this and we can help you to spread it across your base like we've done at so many others. Aviano and Grand Forks, and there's just list after list. Kadena and Yokota and so on. Andrews and Edwards, just the list is exhaustive. And if it's good enough for the military, it's good enough for your civilian organization. If it excels in the military environment, it will excel in your organization. Because the military has a great way of filtering out the leadership nonsense that doesn't work. And so these are the 2 paths. The first one is, do you want to pick up the torch and actually learn to teach and execute and implement all the things I'm talking about? Great. Go to letsexecute.militarySherpa.com, schedule a call with me, my team, and we'll be talking soon on the phone about how we get this toolkit into your hands. If you're a team leader, and you're like, this all sounds amazing. I want all of this on my team. I want to increase our key performance indicators. I want my team to have psychological safety. I want everyone on my team to understand their voice, to understand empathy and problem solving and future and present communication code. Go to letsexecute.militarySherpa.com. You and I will jump on a call or a member of my team, and we'll sort through how we can serve you, how we can cut retention, how we can increase efficiency, and actually improve the key metrics, the key performance indicators of your team. So let's execute.militarySherpa.com. Take a minute. So do it now. Go into the chat, write boom, BOOM in the chat to let me know that you did it. And I'll start to see them on my phone as they pop up. But let's execute.militarySherpa.com. Let's either get you certified as one of our guides so that you can teach this and carry the torch, or talk about how we implement this in your organization now. So while you do that, as I promised, I have 5 tips that will help you. Now, these are not going to be in any specific order. And in some ways, they'll be directly related to what we did. And in some ways, they'll be not directly related. But these are helpful tips. I try to give you tips that I know will hit those voices where they live, hit them where it hurts. And so here are the 5 tips. And again, let's execute.militarySherpa.com. But here are your 5 tips. Here we go. Tip number 1. If you're a thinker, as we went through, you said, no, empathy is probably my secondary voice. Thinkers are probably my foundational voice. Thinkers, learn to nod your head. Master your nonverbals and be quiet. When people bring you problems, listen. Listen before you respond. Listen before you provide advice. If people want advice, ask them, do you want me to collaborate on this with you? Do you want me to give you advice, or are you looking for support right now? I just want support right now. Okay, cool. Hold back and don't give them advice. If you do this, your influence will explode. More and more people will start to rely on you and trust you if you can learn to be quiet and master your nonverbals. Become the quietest person in the room. Your influence will explode. Number 2, feelers. If you said, feeler's my foundation and thinker is probably secondary for me, learn to hold people accountable. Setting deadlines, holding people accountable when they're executing for you is the number 1 thing you can do to improve your reputation, to improve the performance of your team. And remember, never forget that a lack of accountability punishes your high performers, because your high performers will continue to do their job. It's the low performers that take advantage of you. And so your high performers bear that burden, or you do. So you've got to learn to hold people accountable. Their failure is not your fault. And it simply looks like this. Hey, the deadline is 12 o'clock. 12:0001 is late. And you just communicate that to your team. So I'll give you all of the leeway that you need. But if you're late, there's going to be a consequence. And it might be you're going to give me a daily status report on all the projects you're working on for a week, a month, if you fail. Or maybe it goes beyond that. But the moment that people understand that your deadlines are non-negotiable, then your life will improve. You'll stop doing the work because it's easier than delegating it. So learn to hold people accountable, and you'll find yourself delegating more and more often to the benefit of both you and your team, because the more you delegate, the more they level up. And the more you delegate, the better your leadership ability becomes, and your capacity as well. All right, if these tips are helpful so far, thumbs up in the comments. Give me an oh yeah, give me a thumbs up. Give me a this makes sense. Hopefully this is kind of some hard-hitting tips here. So tip 1, learn to nod your head. Feelers, learn to hold other people accountable. Tip number 3, present voices. If you said I'm a present voice, beware of micromanagement. Our present voices have this tendency sometimes to micromanage or ask loaded questions. So how we counter this is give people clear expectations and clear milestones, and then give them lots of space. And so if you need a weekly update to feel comfortable, just tell people, hey, every week I'm going to need this status update. Perfect. But stop coming around, hey, how's that project going? Hey, what's going on? We've got to learn to stop doing that, to give people authority and responsibility, and then to step away. If you're a present-oriented voice, you may not feel like it's micromanagement, but your team may feel smothered by even regular check-ins. So keep that in mind. If that's helpful, present voices, give me a oh yeah in the comments. Number 4, future voices. You don't get away scot-free. Start with why. It's not enough to say, we're going to be first. We're going to be the best. We're going to conquer the universe. It's like, okay, cool, but why? Sounds like a lot of work. Talk to us about why this matters. What happens if we do this? How does our life change? How does our life improve? How does the life of our customers improve? Hey, what happens if we don't do this? Is there a consequence if we don't do this? And then what happens to people that did? Do you have examples? Has there been pilot projects, white papers, examples of where this helped an organization, a team, a company? Give us an example. And then last, the communication code. Look, as you heard and as we went through the communication code, there were things that you possibly realized you were doing wrong. All of us need to collectively back up and apologize. Go fix those things. If you've been getting the communication code wrong, go fix those things. And teach the language to others. More than any of the others, teach this language to others so that you can collaborate together and work together. So these are my top 5 pro tips. Take a picture, take an example. Don't forget, let's execute.militarySherpa.com. Let's execute.militarySherpa.com. Boom in the comments once you do. Otherwise, it's been awesome hanging out with you today. I hope that you had a great time. I hope that your life was transformed. And I hope that this evening, something will be different at the dinner table. Tomorrow, something will be different at the conference table. I hope to hear from you soon. I can't wait to have a conversation with you one-on-one.